Hello, everyone. My name is Courtney Pollock, and I'm the Marketing Coordinator for SWK Technologies. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar, The Missing Link Between Your ERP and Optimizing Inventory, presented by Russ Graf and Tom Wilson of NetStock. A little housekeeping before we get started. Everyone has been placed on mute to keep the background noise to a minimum. However, throughout the webinar, you can submit any questions you have. If you'd like to submit a question, look for the question section or the chat box in your GoToWebinar box, and we'll answer all your questions at the end of the presentation. We're also recording this presentation, and it will be distributed tomorrow to all attendees, as well as those who registered but were unable to attend. And finally, we'd appreciate your participation in our polling questions throughout the presentation and your response to our closing survey. With that said, we appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to attend this webinar. We're here to help you get the most out of your software solutions and help you find an easier way to run your business. We've invited NetStock here today because they are industry leaders in inventory optimization and forecasting. So whether you're here researching a new solution or you're just here to learn more about NetStock, we'd like to encourage you to ask any questions you have. And lastly, as a quick reminder, SWK is constantly sharing important updates and software tips and tricks on our social media channels. We encourage you to follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, where we post more recorded webinars. With that said, I'm going to hand it over to Russ and Tom.
Thanks very much, Courtney. Really appreciate it. And thank you, all those that are in attendance or maybe listening to this as a recording later. Appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedules to join us today. As mentioned, my name is Russ Graf, and I have the honor of managing channel partners and channel relationships for NetStock. And of course, one of those relationships and one of my favorite and most important relationships is with SWK. So my thanks to SWK for giving us the opportunity to present and really to be part of this series of presentations that all are connected in that the goal is to help all of you as users of ERPs to get the most out of those applications. My history, if you found me on LinkedIn, you see my reference there. I was 25 years a partner of ERP and implementing and selling and supporting different ERP applications over the years. And it was always frustrating to me when we visited with a customer and we determined that customer was maybe just barely scratching the surface or maybe getting 30 or 50% of the power out of the investment that they made. And it's no small investment, both in terms of dollars and time and energy and so forth to put these applications in place and to leverage them. So we really encourage you to pursue not only what we talk about today, but other aspects of this series from SWK. I think it's exactly right on target for the way to be thinking. So again, thanks for the opportunity to present to you. So the topic today, as mentioned, we're titling this The Missing Link Between Your ERP and Optimizing Inventory. So from an agenda perspective, we're going to talk a little bit about how we can unlock some of that data that sits in your ERP application and leverage it for our purposes. Then we'll talk about some inventory best practices and drill into a couple of topics there just to get us thinking about how to do this the best possible way. One of the challenges we have, of course, is supply risk today, and so we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we'll wrap it up from this from this content perspective on talking about some what if and modeling scenarios that we can leverage with the application of the NetStock tool. And then not on the agenda, but as mentioned, Tom Wilson, now on our team, is going to join us near the end and will actually give us a live demo of the application. And not only that, but you are all going to get a little bit of a teaser, an early view of what is actually going to be released on Monday of next week. So in just a few days, there is a brand new refresh of the NetStock application. And we're very excited about it. I think you're going to really be impressed with what you see if you've seen our application before. It's always been intuitive and easy to use and so forth, and kind of on the leading edge of that, but we've taken it to another level. So you're going to get a chance to see that in an early release. So let's talk about the first topic then, and that is unlocking data in your ERP. As you all well are aware, right, your ERP application is doing an outstanding job of capturing all kinds of transactions in a very detailed, granular way. Every transaction in terms of receivables and payables, and as it relates to inventory, all the ins and outs, right, shipments, receivements, orders, partial orders, and all that detail of all those transactions are captured all day long. And if you're connected to the internet for e-commerce or online ordering and so forth, that stuff is happening while you're sleeping, right? Your ERP is constantly at work capturing all this tremendous data. And that's great, and it's organized, right? It's well organized in all these different tables and files. We know exactly what that data schema is, so we have all this information or raw data, I guess, at our fingertips, and we know how to get to it. But one of the challenges of that is there's so much of it, first of all, and secondly, it is in all these different disparate tables and files, and so we find ourselves oftentimes writing reports and grabbing tools to kind of aggregate all that information into some meaningful presentation, right, that really helps us make decisions in our business. And so in and of itself, the ERPs give you a somewhat limited perspective on that data, right? And it does a great job of all that transaction and all that order entry and all that stuff and so forth. But there are some gaps there in terms of leveraging all that data, turning it into actionable information, and there's some data points that may or may not be getting captured in many situations and scenarios. So what we find ourselves is dumping data to spreadsheets and those kinds of things, writing custom reports, maybe adding user-defined fields to the database, all of which is doable, right? It's all available to you, and of course, with the help of your SWK consultants and so forth, you can do a lot with that. But there are some gaps there, and what we want to talk about is how can we continue to leverage all that rich data that's captured in that ERP. And that's really the role of the NetStock application as it appears to inventory, right? As it addresses inventory needs and requirements, is we can really take that data to the next level and leverage it to help you really manage this at a best practices level. So what you'll see as we get into this, and as you look at the application, think about how we're leveraging all that great data. And that leads us actually very quickly to our first poll question, and we'd love to get your feedback and on how you leverage some of that data today. So Courtney, if you could launch that first poll.
Yeah, so the poll's launched, so we would appreciate your responses. We'll leave it open for a little bit so you have time to think it through and get those replies in.
So as you think about this, am I just relying on standard reports? Have I built some custom reports or worked with SWK to help me build those? Are you dumping data to an external tool like Excel or some business intelligence tool? Or do you feel like you're probably not doing a great job of that yourself today?
And thank you to everyone that has responded so far. We'll give it a few more seconds and then we're going to close it out. Okay, we're going to close the poll now and share the results. So it looks like we have about 100% of you are relying either on standard ERP reports or aren't leveraging your data very well at all.
Okay. That's an interesting result. Well, hopefully this conversation then will be very helpful to you because I think we have an opportunity here to do better, right? So with that in mind, let's talk about some standard inventory best practices, things that you should be thinking about as you work through managing your suppliers, especially in today's very disrupted supply chain environment, right? Hopefully we've learned some things. We've probably had some challenges. We've probably exposed some gaps in our internal processes and in our reporting and usage of data again. So, you know, what we've been through the last couple of years, primarily as a result of the pandemic, but also we see many of other disruptions. You know, climate change is having an impact. Obviously, global political issues, and now a war in Ukraine. But even strange things like a ship going sideways in the Suez Canal a year ago, right? And the fact that it had ripple effect on supply for months. Amazingly enough, and today still dealing with the pandemic, in that Shanghai, a very major port out of China, has been shut down for literally 6 or 7 weeks now in a very harsh shutdown, lockdown to deal with another surge of COVID. So the disruptions that we've had are unprecedented, and again, they've probably exposed some things, some weaknesses and challenges in our supply chain. And I think the best we can hope for at this point is hopefully we come out of that smarter, right? Let's learn from the experience and find, we've heard the term a new normal. I like the phrase a better normal. How can we come out of this better and smarter and prepared for whatever next disruption occurs? God forbid another pandemic, certainly though that's possible. But no matter what the disruption is, that we're better prepared because we've got more visibility, we're more nimble, we have a better understanding of what's going on in our supply chain. So some of these best practices I think will really help us in that regard. The first one that I list here has to do with classifying your items, really understanding the nature of the SKUs that you have in your database. And some of those may be different if you have multiple locations. Certain locations may stock some items that others don't. So really understanding the nature of the items, not only by value, but how quickly they move. We call that velocity, right? So understanding the speed of movement of those items, what their turns look like, understanding how critical those components are, right? If it's a nut or a bolt that has the risk of shutting down an entire production facility, then we better make sure we're buying enough and buy them in volume and bulk and put them in the corner of the warehouse. Understanding the nature of those items really helps you make decisions and set policies about how you manage those items. So really critical to get that depth of understanding and which ones are most important to your most important customers and things along those lines, margin contribution, et cetera. So there's a lot there that you can learn and leverage as a result, right? The second thing is the concept of safety stock to help decrease risk. And so much of this supply chain management and best practices is really about mitigating risk. I'll probably use that that word a couple times during the presentation here in the next 20 minutes. So the concept of a safety stock, or also known as a buffer stock, is not just in time type inventory, which is a phrase we've heard many times over the last couple years and even decade, but it's really kind of a just in case, right? Just in case something happens. What if a supplier doesn't deliver when it's expected? What if my demand increases unexpectedly, right? I need to have an understanding of those risks, and then to mitigate those risks, I have to have a proper, well-calculated, understood policy around what my safety stock should be for each of those now items that I understand better in each of those locations, whether those are real or virtual locations. So being able to calculate a proper level of safety stock and having that be dynamic as risk environments change is really critical, and it's really a key best practice that you need to think about, and it's something that the NetStock application absolutely does for you. Another topic here, of course, is planning for extended lead times. Again, in our current situation, the last couple of years, and near as I can tell, and the experts that I get to chat with and talk to, it's going to be this way for at least another couple of years. We've got a long way to go for the supply chains to kind of level off and get back to anything near normal. And a big part of that are these extended lead times. And so you've really got to be able to plan for that. So know when you're purchasing that, do I need to purchase a little bit extra? That's always been a standard issue when it came to like Chinese New Year or holiday season in the month of August in Europe. So depending on where you're buying product from, there's always been those opportunities where I had to kind of look forward a little bit to accommodate those lags or those challenges in my supply. But now this has become a regular standard everyday event, right? I heard a report the other day that something like 70% of all purchase order lines now are being changed at least 3 times before the product is delivered. And typically those are extensions of lead time, right? I thought it was going to come in next Tuesday. Now it's going to be the following week. Then I get another update. It's 2 weeks later. You've all personally experienced it. I've just recently personally experienced it with trying to buy some furniture for my house. It's been delayed 4 times. And so we've experienced that as consumers, and all of our businesses are experiencing the same. So you got to plan for that. What does that mean? What's the impact of that? And how do I address it? And how do I stay on top of those changes and updates to make sure that I have that visibility and I can make adjustments accordingly? The fourth bullet point here is improving your forecasting accuracy. So not only challenges on the supply side, but on the demand side of the equation as well. Forecasting is never going to be perfect. It's always a best guess, but there is an ability to improve that, right? We can improve the level of accuracy. And the more we do that, the less safety stock I have to hold. The more we can do that, the better communication I can have with my customers and with my buyers and so forth. So I really need to understand, how do I do the best job possible? And if you're trying to do that with a spreadsheet, or some sort of a custom report or dumping data, you're never going to get to the level of accuracy that your business really needs to compete in today's marketplace. That's a big part of what drives NetStock every day. We see companies like Amazon and Walmart and so forth, these big box stores that have just incredible amount of resources, money and talent and so forth. If they're struggling with lead times, what have they done? They've gone out and bought their own freighters, right? Well, if you're a middle market company, that's not an option for you. So how do I compete against those guys in the marketplace? Well, you have to be the best you can be with the tools you have, and that's the role that NetStock plays in your organization, is to give you that kind of very sophisticated, high-level capability, but at a reasonable price and ability to get it up and running and so forth. So forecasting is a big part of that, and we've got a great forecasting engine in the application. The fifth best practice here is just one of communication. I've had the good fortune of interviewing and doing some podcasts and so forth with various thought leaders and industry experts and so forth. And one of the things that has really been consistent in all their feedback and conversation is the absolute need to improve both the quality and the quantity of our communications, both up and down the supply chain, right? And sharing data along that way. So not just, slapped on the back, congratulations, hey, how you doing? Good to meet you, what's going on? But really substantial conversations that share data that say, here's what I'm looking at, here's what I'm seeing, here's what I expect my requirements to be, Mr. Supplier, can you meet those requirements? All that kind of stuff. And so sharing of data along those lines is when you expect to be placing an order on that supplier, and in what quantities, and what you need your lead times to be and so forth. Those are valuable conversations, and not only directly with your customers and your suppliers, but maybe with your customers' customers and your suppliers, right? Go one more level up and down that supply chain to know what's really going on in the marketplace, so you can get ahead of the curve, and then be nimble enough to be able to respond to that and act accordingly and make your decisions accordingly. So communication is huge, and data is a part of that, right? How can I share appropriate data with the partners of mine in the supply chain? And then the last best practice here we talk about is alignment and collaboration within your own organization. So we last talked about communicating outside the organization. What about inside the company, right? There's a process that you may, if you read any of the literature, you'll see a process out there called S&OP, which stands for Sales and Operations Planning. Sometimes you'll see SI&OP, Sales, Inventory, and Operations Planning. But the concept of that is an internal process where all the key players in the organization, finance, manufacturing, operations, buyers and planners and so forth, all get together, share accurate data with each other, and say, here's what's going on in the world and in our market and with our customers and our suppliers. What are our capacities? What are our capabilities? What do we do? What are our expectations? What are our forecasts? And then make a plan and build a policy and execute right against that plan. So that's something that has always been present in larger firms. I think as a result of all the challenges in supply chains, we're seeing this more and more be part of the normal process within a mid-market company. Small, medium-sized businesses really need to do this and appreciate the value of this within your company. So be thinking about that. I hope that has got you, is thought-provoking in some way. That's got you thinking about how you're operating internally. Maybe there's some opportunities here for improvement. And again, of course, the NetStock application can help you with that. Just to drill in a little bit deeper on the supplier side, since that is such a prevalent challenge for us these days, right, is with these extended lead times. There's just a couple of other thoughts for you. I don't want to go too deep here, but again, understanding the importance of the items and therefore the suppliers of those items, right? So as you do that classification of the item, now understand which suppliers become most critical to you, and look at how you work with those suppliers. And secondarily, should I have a backup supplier, right? An alternate resource that I could possibly get those same products from in case my supplier really crashes on me, all right? If I have a real challenge, do I have a backup plan? Some of that what if planning that we can do. And I would suggest, and other experts have suggested, that not only have those secondary suppliers identified, but actually do some business with them. Even if on a per transaction basis, it's a little less economical, a little less profitable. The benefit of having done that is that when push comes to shove, if your primary supplier is failing you, I now have I have the relationships, I know who to call, I understand their current processes, if they've got paperwork and portals or whatever I have to deal with, I understand what that process looks like, and they know who I am. So we really suggest that you manage that risk by having a backup plan and actually using that with some cadence, so that if you need to, you don't go to the back of the line, right? You've got a relationship in place and you can get an order processed and get what you need. So identifying that critical nature of those items and those suppliers, and then having backup plans for those would be really key to managing this risk. And then just looking at your spend, right, and understanding maybe I can rationalize some of the items. Maybe some of the items that we currently stock could be managed by my vendor and drop shipped, or you know, whatever the case might be. But I have to take a look at that spend and understand, again, based on how I classify those items and the importance of those suppliers and so forth, what can I do about that to manage that spend? And the finance folks can help you with that. And then just visibility, right? Having a dashboard or some sort of a way to really understand what's going on in the big picture. One of the challenges with all this data that we capture is that it can be overwhelming, right? There can be too much data. You hear the phrase big data, right? So the challenge, there's very great power in that, but the challenge is, how do I manipulate and analyze all that big data? So we really need to leverage things like dashboards and alerts and so forth to help me understand what's most important and show me where I need to focus my time and energy, kind of a management by exception sort of approach. And dashboards can really help you with that. And you'll see that in the demo that Tom will do here in a few minutes of the NetStock application. So I think that leads us now, Courtney, to our second poll question, talking about, you know, we've talked about supply and demand and visibility and lead times. I'm interested in learning from you folks, if you could let us know what you sense as your biggest challenge these days.
Great, and like Russ said, you should be able to see that poll on your screen now, so we'd appreciate your responses again. And thank you for those of you who have already responded, and we'll leave it open for a few more seconds to let you guys get those answers in. Okay, and we are going to close down the poll. So if you're the last response, go ahead and. Okay.
Back now or hold your peace.
So it looks like we had a couple not responded, but out of the people that responded, it looks like their biggest challenge today is a lack of visibility.
Okay. Excellent. That's great feedback. Thank you for that. And yeah, I think that's, again, part and parcel of, hey, we got all this data, but how do I leverage it? How do I really make use of it and act on it and build policies around it? So that makes a lot of sense. So thank you again for that. A couple final thoughts before I turn it over to Tom for a demo of the application and talk you through how we address some of these challenges that we've been talking about. I think a big one is the idea of kind of what if scenarios and modeling, right? So we get our data, we've captured it on a timely basis, we've got it organized and all that stuff, and now we're trying to leverage all that data. One of the ways that we can do that is by doing some analysis and some what if, right? Sometimes when you talk about business intelligence tools and big data and applications and environments today in the literature, you'll hear the terms predictive analytics and prescriptive analytics. And so with the NetStock application, Tom will show how we can actually really address those, right? The predictive stuff is really things like forecasting, right? Where I can predict what it's going to look like. How can I project out into the future what my inventory balances and statuses will look like a month from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, and so forth, based on the snapshot of data that we have today, knowing what our demand profiles look like, what our supply and lead times look like, what our marketplace looks like, and so forth. I can take that snapshot and then do projections out into the future and predict what the future might look like. And so that's very powerful. But then the next level of that is the prescriptive analysis that says, okay, assuming that's what my future looks like, what can I do about that? How can I impact that? How can I make that future better? What prescriptions or recommendations can that data make for me to improve my situation? If I can foresee 3 months from now that I'm going to have a stock out situation of a critical part, well, what can I do about that today? How can I place an order today, expedite a portion of it, whatever the case may be, to prevent that problem from occurring or to improve that that scenario? So that's really where the prescriptive approach comes in. So there's things we can do there to leverage the data to do some of that scenario and what if planning, playing with different forecast scenarios, playing with different supply scenarios, and being able to be nimble there. And we talk about these redundancy systems in the second bullet point here, revisiting some of those parameters, right? If our safety stock calculation can be dynamic in nature and get recalculated on a regular basis, maybe even on a nightly basis, what would that do for me in my organization, right? That would be huge. I can remember, again, as my days as an ERP implementer, where we would implement a new system and we'd spend weeks building the new tables in the inventory master file with all these data points, right? Lead times, economic order quantities, mins and maxes and reorder points and all that stuff. And within 6, 9, 12 months, that data was all obsolete because the world had changed. In today's world, and I go back a ways, today's world, I don't think that data is accurate for more than a week because of the nature of supply chains today. That stuff's obsolete and out of whack in a hurry. So you really have to have a tool that helps you be dynamic with those things. And that's where you can build in some of that redundancy. And again, it's managing your capacity for risk. Obviously, if I want zero risk of a stock out, I can do that, but it requires me getting 4 more warehouses overflowing with product, right? I can prevent a stock out, but that's not a profitable approach to business. There's a balancing act. What is the tolerance that I have for the potential risk of stocking out? For some items, it's different than other items. For some customers, it's different than other customers. So if I understand those risk scenarios, I can do my what if analysis and play around with that. And well, what if I increased my investment in inventory by $1 million? What would that take me to in terms of my fill rate for my customers? And is that a smart decision? Now I can make decisions based on that data, right? Instead of gut feel or putting the thumb to the wind, just trying to understand it. It just makes a huge difference in your ability to be profitable and competitive in your marketplace, right? So things like understanding your sources, doing those what if scenarios, having dynamic adjustments to the data that drives those decisions, and then building that forecasting engine and increasing your accuracy there. And demand forecasting is an ideal place for artificial intelligence and machine learning type applications in what we're doing as well. So some good stuff there. All right, and with that, I think it's time to turn it over to Tom Wilson. So Tom, if you give us a quick walkthrough and a sneak peek of this really cool new version of NetStock coming out next week.
Okay, great, thanks, Russ. Hey, Courtney, if you could let me share my screen, that'd be great.
There you go.
Okay, so do you see the dashboard?
Looks good.
Okay, hey, great. Well, thanks, Russ. Hey, everybody. So as Russ said, my name is Tom Wilson. I'm a solution consultant for NetStock, and it's my privilege to give you a introductory tour to the new look and feel, as well as some of the functionality of the software. So I've pulled up a live instance of NetStock, and if you've seen it before, it does have a new look and feel. And part of that is there was certainly nothing wrong with the old user interface. It just was about 10 years old, and it was time for a little bit of a facelift, if you will. And several goals were involved in that, and one of them was to make it easier to navigate. A second was to make it easier to use on various devices and browsers, because what we found, a lot of our customers are using it in their office with very large monitors, and then they go out in the field with an iPad or a phone, and the screens just didn't always scale to the right level. So one thing I wanted to show you in our design point is if you are in an office and you have a large screen, you can make it the full size of the screen. Let's say you leave and you're out in the field and you moved to a browser that's on a iPad. This screen will adapt very nicely to the size of an iPad. But let's say I'm on my phone and I'm out in the field again and I'm on an iPhone, we can adjust to that size as well. So it is much more, it scales itself much more nicely to the different devices and different browsers you might be using. So that was one design point. Then another was to make better use of the space as well in terms of navigation. We used to have our navigation across the top, and now if you've noticed, we've moved it over to the side. And one of the things we can do is I can make that permanent, or I can hide it. And when I hide it, then it's still there, but I get even more real estate on my screen. But then if I need to go to the navigation, I can simply hover and it'll pop back up. So just a lot of real user-friendly interfaces that make it easier to use, easier to navigate. But under the hood, it's still a really sophisticated engine. A lot of the functionality has not changed. So let me give you just a quick tour. I'll highlight some of the industry best practices that Russ talked about, and then we'll focus a little bit on some of the more modeling and future-looking projection types of functionality. So let's start with just a quick tour. The idea of the dashboard is where you first log on. The idea of the dashboard is to bring to your attention what your inventory is, recommend what it should be, and bring to your attention items that might need your attention right now. And it's laid out in several panels, and it can be based on one or many stocking locations. Those are all set up in your ERP. And if I click, I can see all of the stocking locations. I can toggle between them. I'm just going to pick on one location for demo, and that's Los Angeles. And with just a quick glance, I can see that according to my ERP, we are carrying $10.3 million of inventory. Now, this is highly scalable. We have customers with less than $100,000 of inventory planning with the tool. We've got customers with over 50 million. My demo database happens to have about 10.3. But according to ERP, you are currently stocking $10.3 million of inventory in Los Angeles against the optimal recommendation of 4.7. That would be the optimal inventory. Given demand for the items, lead time from the supplier, supplier performance, that would be the optimal inventory to fulfill your demand. So with just a quick glance, I can see I've got quite a bit more inventory in Los Angeles than the planning tool is recommending. In fact, if I slide over to the next panel, you have some excess stock, and that is defined as inventory above the maximum recommended stocking levels. And right now there are over 2,200 items at this stocking location that are in excess. And just the value of that excess inventory is costing your business $3.6 million. And if I hover where it says excess value, I can get an online report showing me every one of those items that's in excess. But on the dashboard, out of all those items, we're simply trying to bring your attention to the top 5. These 5 items alone are costing you $260,000 in excess inventory. Almost 10% of your excess problem is these 5. So if you do nothing else on a daily or weekly basis, you might want to really keep your eye on these top 5 lists. But notice I've got a box with 2 letters. That's one of those industry best practices that Russ talked about, and that is not all items contribute the same to your business. So by setting up rules along with data from your ERP, we will be able to classify every item based on its value to your business as an A, B, or a C item, which is the first letter, and its inventory turns or volume, the second letter, high, medium, or low. So this first item, it's a C item that's low turning. So it's one of the less important items to your business, yet that item is the one that's costing you the most in excess inventory right now. Might be a good candidate to try to burn down. So you can see where you have too much inventory, but we can also point out any orders in your ERP, work orders, purchase orders, and we've identified 514 items on order, and when they arrive, they're going to add to your excess problem. So proactive heads up, here are some items you might want to look at because they're candidates to maybe delay or cancel the order. So the first 2 panels are bringing to your attention where you have too much inventory. Now, right below that is the opposite. Hey, are there any items you don't have enough of? And right now, according to ERP, there's some items that have none in stock at this location. In fact, there are 967 items with no inventory, but there's demand on those items, and you can't fulfill that demand until you replenish. And until you do, you could be at risk of not being able to fulfill that demand, which could result in lost sales. Doesn't mean you're going to lose a sale, but you're certainly at risk. I can look at every one of those 967, but again, here are the items that have the biggest impact to your business. And in the stock out item, you might want to pay more attention to your A and higher turning items. But that's where you're stocked out right now. And then finally, we're trying to bring to your attention on the dashboard any items that you're about to stock out of. These are items that you have some inventory, but heads up, you're about to stock out. And when you do, it could have some impact on customer service. So let's say from here, I want to look at a little more detail. I want to start to think about how to resolve some of these problems. So let's look at this one right here, ST9503. Let's click on it. And with one click, it's going to take me to the detail. Now, I'll just give you a quick tour of what you see here, and in doing so, I want to kind of compare that to some of the highlights that Russ talked about. So first, Russ talked about that in an industry best practice, it's pretty hard to determine what your inventory should be unless you know the demand of that item moving forward. So one of the fundamental tenets of the NetStock or the Sage Inventory Advisor solution is we're going to generate a forecast. And so we will automatically load the sales history from your ERP. This particular item had 31 months, and that's represented graphically in blue. We are going to compare that pattern in blue to over a dozen forecasting methods and pick the one that is the best fit. And that's an industry best practice. It's hard to determine which forecasting method is the best fit in a spreadsheet. And a lot of our customers tell us they guess. Well, we're going to analyze that pattern in blue, pick the one that statistically is the best fit, and use it to create a computer-generated forecast for the next 12 months. We can extend that to 24 months as well. But a very robust forecast, we're going to track how is that forecast doing against actual sales, and we can alert you to if that forecast goes up or down or if it is off, and then you can make adjustments. Then the second best practice, and Russ talked quite a bit about safety stock and how that needs to be dynamic. You can go into your ERP and set a minimum stocking level for any item, but how did you do it? How often do you update it? Most of our customers tell us it's kind of a best guess. Well, in the NetStock solution, we are going to look at several dynamic inputs. And one of those is we can tie that to how important is this item to your business. This is an A item that's high turning. We're going to set a more aggressive target for that item, which is going to give us a higher fill rate because we don't ever want to run out of that item. We're going to look at the lead time. But more importantly, how is the supplier, which in this case is the Consolidated Tire Company, how are they doing delivering against that lead time? Because if they're always late, we should increase the safety stock. If they're always early, maybe we don't need as much. So we can go back to your ERP, we can pull in statistics on every order we've placed on this supplier, and we can see exactly how we've done. So we're going to dynamically create that safety stock based on all of those dynamic factors. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pull that into this policy panel. And we're going to look at, hey, we know our lead time's 90 days, but how many units do you need to cover 90 days? Well, it depends on the next 90 days in your forecast. Well, so for this item, you need 195 units to cover 90 days. You need 7 units to cover that 5 days of safety stock. So now in units, driven off the forecast and that dynamic safety stock, here is your recommended minimum stocking level, reorder point, and maximum stocking level. And as Russ said, we're going to calculate that and adjust that every day based on changes that we're seeing from your ERP. We're going to then compare that to your stock on hand, and according to your ERP, you have 51. That puts you below the reorder point. We're recommending that you place an order. And we do that every day for every item. Now, does that mean you've got to go hunting around for every item to see if you need to place an order? Absolutely not. The dashboard is designed to bring to your attention problems with information at your fingertips to resolve those problems. But for any item that has gone below its reorder point, all you have to do is come over to your orders tab and with one click, show me every item for the Los Angeles location across all my suppliers that's gone below its reorder point. And here is a list of every item that has gone below its reorder point, but broken out by supplier. So for instance, the Consolidated Tire Company. NetStock is recommending that you place 9 items on order. Now, you may order 20 items from that supplier, but today 9 have gone below its reorder point. It's recommending 4,600 units. At your cost, that'll add up to $269,000. If you have cubic feet in weight, we will total that, which might be helpful if you're trying to fill up a truck or a container. But as a purchasing manager, if you want to review the recommendation to place 9 items on order, maybe you want to make some changes or adjustments, all you have to do is select that supplier. Let's go look at the recommended order. Haven't created it yet, I'm just looking at it. And here is the recommendation that the planning tool has. Here is each of those 9 items. And for each one of those 9 items, I can see the forecast. I can see the recommended order, your cost, what that adds up to, cubic feet, weight. If I need more information, I have a drop-down panel. And now I can see a little more information on the forecast. I can see what's already on hand. I can see what's already on order. And if I still need more information before I agree or disagree with the recommended order, I can even drill into the detail from here. I can even do it in a new window. And now I've drilled down to this SKU, and I can see the same information. I can look at the forecast, I can change it. I can look at the safety stock, my calculations, what my stock on hand is, my supplier performance, open sales orders, all in one place. And if I disagree with the recommendation, I can always go back to that order, and I can always, based on my knowledge and expertise as a planner, I can change that. In this case, I'm going to add 50 units, and I just changed the order down here. And I can continue to review each of the items that is being recommended, drilling into detail if I need it, making adjustments if I want to. But when I'm ready to place the order, I still have to execute a purchase order or a work order in ERP. Don't have to go rekey it. All I have to do is hit the download button, and this will be immediately extracted and imported into the purchase order module of your ERP. And what you'll start to see as you use the tool is you'll start to see your inventory trend towards the model. As you manage your excess stock and catch it before it happens, you'll see excess reduce. And as you catch stockouts and place optimal orders, you'll see stockouts reduce. So a very powerful tool. But then Russ also talked about some modeling capabilities, so projecting into the future. And we can do that a couple of different ways. So let me pull up an item, and I just want to show you a single item. Now, this particular item, we've generated a forecast, we've calculated a min, reorder point, and a max. And what we can do is we can map those mins and maxes to that forecast, and we can project it over the next 12 or 24 months. And when I hit my projection button, that's exactly what you see here. I can see my forecast in gray. The top of the gray is my max, the bottom is my min, and we can map how you're going to consume based on your forecast this SKU. And we can show you when we recommend that you receive orders, and what we recommend is to receive that order back up to your maximum stocking level. And the idea is we want to receive an order just as you hit your minimum, bringing you back to your maximum. And again, those minimums can change dynamically, which means the order needs to change. But when do I need to place an order given that supplier performance so that I receive this order right here in red? Well, let's overlay the recommended orders. I need to receive this order, which means I need to place it here. And what that tells me then is here is when you'll need to place orders on this SKU. So at the item level, we can give you a lot of information as to when you'll need to place orders on the item. You can share that with your suppliers. But I can also look at this not just at the item level, but I can look at it across all of my items. So I'm going to go to what we call our projection module. And this is a module. And what that means is I'm going to take all of my policies. So let's look at the fill rates that we've set for our A, B, or C items. Let's look at the forecast across all our items. Maybe I want to change the forecast. Maybe I've got a big promotion for some of my items. Maybe COVID is going to make me get rid of some of my items. So I can change my policies, I can change my forecast, but what I can do is I can run that projection not for one item, but across every item. And I can see what my policies, what my forecasts are going to do. And in this case, over the next year, we're projecting you're going to decrease your inventory. You're going to keep your fill rates pretty flat, but you're going to improve your turns. I can go in and here's visibly what the forecast across all the items are, but I can go change that and rerun the projection. But I can see what the recommended orders are going to be. And I can come up here to my replenishment, and I can see that in more detail. I can look at it in a table view. But what that allows me to do is, hey, based on my policies, based on my forecast, here's what we're projecting your investment's going to look like. So that would give you more of that planning capability that Russ talked about. And then finally, another section of this is let's go back here. I'm going to go back to my dashboard. But another thing is we can do some modeling at the supplier level. And so I'm going to go to my supplier tab. And when I click on it, I can look at all of my suppliers. And so, for instance, let's look at this one. This supplier provides 668 different SKUs to my business. So I want to come over here to where it says supplier performance. And when I click on that, this is another module of our solution, and it's going to show me a lot more detail about this supplier. I can see which SKUs this supplier supplies to which of my stocking locations, what my overall inventory value is from this supplier, how much safety stock do I stock from this supplier, and is it maybe more than I should have because how is this supplier doing? What's the risk that they're providing? And if this offset days is positive, that means they have had some issues and we're recommending a little more safety stock than you might need. I can see what my average lead time is, historical purchase orders, overdue purchase orders, open purchase orders, and from a modeling perspective, future recommended purchase orders. And let's go look at that. So for just this supplier, here's what we're recommending you can expect to buy from this supplier over the next 12 months. Again, we can do that over the next 24 months, but I can look at that in even more detail. And I can look at it across locations, and maybe I just want to look at my Los Angeles location. Here's what we're projecting you're going to need to purchase, and I'm going to break it out by month. Here is every SKU broken out by month that we're projecting you're going to need to purchase from this supplier. And I can sit down with the supplier, I can share this with them, I can share the performance statistics with them. But as Russ said, maybe I want to focus more on just my most important items. So if I'm talking to the supplier, maybe I'm not as worried about my C items at low turning, but let's come over to this filter and let's come over to my classifications. And I just want to look at my A items that are high turning. I'm going to apply that filter. And here are all of the A items that are high turning that we're projecting you should buy from this supplier. So you can have a policy review with the supplier. You can look at all the things we're projecting you're going to need to buy from that supplier over the coming 12 or 24 months. And on the fly, with sharing the same screen and maybe a Zoom meeting, I can show them, and here's the ones that I really need you to pay attention to for me. These are the ones that are most critical to my business. So it really gives you a capability to project demand, project performance, look at the risks, and you can have some real strategic modeling conversations with your suppliers. And then that's all part of the software. So with that, again, I just wanted to give you kind of a summary of the highlights. Again, it gets its data as input from ERP. It's going to put that through an analytic engine that's based on industry best practices to recommend stocking levels, replenishment levels, and bring to your attention where you need to pay your valuable time and attention to. So with that, Courtney, Russ, let me stop and let me turn it back for any questions.
Great. So we're going to toss it back over to Russ.
All right, thanks, Tom. Great job. Hopefully those of you watching were impressed by all the different things we can do there. And you know, the title of this presentation was, you know, the missing link, and it's part of this larger series of leveraging the power of your ERP. Hopefully you got a good sense of both of those things being addressed by a really powerful tool, and we'd love to have you explore further. You've got my contact information there. Of course, if there's any questions now, Courtney, we can address those. But as you think about this, maybe reach out to your SWK account manager to get us engaged for a personal demo or discussion of your particular needs. We'd be more than happy to do that. So thanks again for your time. But Courtney, any questions that have come in that we need to address before we call it a day?
So yes, if you have any questions, go ahead and enter them in the questions section of the GoToWebinar. We've had a couple throughout the presentation. So our first question is, if you had to pick one tip from the list of inventory best practices, what would it be?
That's an interesting question. You know, I think it starts with classifying your items for me, right? It's really understanding the nature of the items and digging into that data. So yeah, that's a tough one because they're all really valuable. And I think the other thing to think about is it's a journey. You're not going to flip a switch and get better at this overnight. You are all at a certain place today in your abilities to manage their supply chains and understand all this volatility that's going on. So wherever you are today, what is the next step for you to get improvement, right? And take that step. I think maybe the right answer is start the journey, right? Take that first step. And then let that settle in, and then, okay, now what's my next level of improvement that I can do? But if you're all trying to do this through standard reports or through Excel reports, you're at a level of maturity on this curve that you could definitely make progress easily and move forward. And it could be a multi-year type of continuous improvement process for you, but you got to start.
So that leads to the next question we had, which is, you know, how big of a project is it to deploy SIA?
Yeah, good question. It's actually not a huge project. You know, we've got a very solid methodology that we've deployed. We've done thousands of implementations, right? We're by far the global leader in this space. So we've got a very mature methodology that is in place. that is very successful. It's got 5, 6 steps to it. There's some coaching, there's some self-learning. We've built in a ton of learning educational tools built into the app and embedded videos and so forth. I think the fastest I've ever seen one go in is a couple of weeks. I think if we're a typical distribution company, it's maybe more like 6. And across those 6 weeks, it's probably maybe 40 hours worth of work spread across those 6 weeks to get in and get coached and try and play with some things. And the installation is almost instantaneous. That's all pre-built. So we get connections and we get a dashboard very fast. It's just then a question of how do we refine that data and make it work for your particular scenario. So hopefully that answered the question, but it's very fast. And the return on investment and the payback is very rapid.
Great. And I think our final question, unless we have any last minute submissions, is one everyone always wants to know. How much does it cost?
Yeah, exactly. And our pricing model is a little bit unique. It's actually based on the value of the inventory that our application would be managing. So if I've got one warehouse and there's $1 million worth of inventory in that warehouse, then your pricing would be based on that $1 million value. And in the Sage world, there's 2 components to that. There's a one-time activation fee and then the monthly or annual subscription. In other environments like Acumatica, we may or may not have an activation fee. We sometimes roll that into the monthly. We got a little more flexibility there. But so it might be $500 a month. If you've got $10 million worth of inventory, it's going to be a little bit higher, but it doesn't scale at the same rate that the inventory value does. So it's very cost effective. Very easy to get in, and it's typically a 30-day renewal subscription, right? So even worst case scenario, if you're 6 months into it and you're not quite getting the value that you thought you might, you can always cancel with 30 days notice. There's no long-term commitment, but the pricing is very, very cost effective. Again, the ROI is very strong. You'll save hundreds of thousands of dollars just by improving your fill rates and reducing your stockouts and reducing your excess inventory, which is triple-digit ROI.
Great. Thank you, Russ. So I think that is going to be all of our questions for today. So I'd like to thank Russ and Tom for putting on such a great presentation for us and giving us a sneak peek into the new software as well. So that was great to see. And then I'd also like to thank everyone in our audience for attending this webinar today, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks so much, Courtney. Thanks, SWK, and thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye now.